In this video, we'll be going over the rarest unobtainable mounts in the game's history that were once given to players via events or by gaining special achievements. And at number 10, we have the Obsidian Worldbreaker. This mount was given to players who completed the achievement Memories of Fel, Frost, and Fire during WoW's 15th anniversary, which made the players go back in time to one of Chromie's memories to do the most memorable mechanics of 3 beloved bosses from the oldest expansions of Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and Cataclysm. The difficulty of obtaining this mount came from requiring a group to be able to do it, or just queuing LFR, aka not very difficult. Blizzard decided to pseudo-buff the bosses and required players to do mechanics, albeit small ones, to kill the 3 bosses, with Cataclysm being the most difficult for players to complete, due to the bugginess of the Cho'Gall fight and the amount of damage that the overtuned abilities, specifically Flame's orders, were doing. Barely half the players obtained this mount during the time period, possibly because it was during Battle for Azeroth, where a lot of players had quit the game. It is possible to find this mount being sold on the black market auction house, but it's extremely rare. While a few other no longer obtainable mounts can be found in the black market auction house, this one would be the only one on this list that can still be obtained technically, although rarely, and for an insanely high gold cost. And at number 9, we have the Grove Warden. This mount was obtained during Warlords of Draenor's Hellfire Citadel raid, and it just required the player to kill Archimonde on at least heroic difficulty, and upon Archimonde's defeat, he would drop an item called the Remnant of Chaos, which led the player to Boonglade and after a short quest, rewarded them the mount, while also hinting at their next expansion. The reason this mount is so rare is because the vast majority of the player base had quit during Warlord's content drought and were sick of running Hellfire Citadel so much, so kinda similar to the previous spot on this list. Plus, it required a minimum of heroic difficulty, which returning players did not have the gear to do, nor the gold to buy a carry, as boosting wasn't as rampant or widespread in those days as it is today, even though it definitely did exist. There were lots of community events held to help returning players get the mount before it went away, but that wasn't really enough to get players to return to the game, so the mount remained somewhat rare because of just how many people did not come back until Legion. And at number 8, we have Tyrael's Charger. This mount was only obtainable during Blizzard's annual pass promotion in 2012. This required them purchasing a 12-month sub, and alongside the mount, the subscriber would also get a free copy of Diablo 3, and guaranteed access to the Pandaria beta. Tyrael's Charger is a reference to the NPC, Tyrael in Diablo, as its wing design is the same as Tyrael's angel wings in said game, who is an Archangel of Justice. Although the original name for Tyrael's Charger was Space Charger, and was changed before patch 4.3 went live, and was probably changed because they thought it was okay to just have Diablo references in the game since they had already existed in the game prior. The reason this mount is so rare is because after the event, it was made no longer available, so it was only available for Asian regions of the game in shop because they never got the annual event. And it cannot be obtained at all in the US or EU accounts anymore. For an extremely short time and only on the PTR during 5.3.2, Tyrael's Charger was available for purchase for EU and US regions, but was quickly removed. Barely 1/3 of the player base managed to obtain this mount before it was removed from the game. Maybe also based on the fact that this came out at the end of Cataclysm, and many players did not like the concept of Pandaria, so few were willing to commit to a year sub for it. And at number 7, we have the Kor'kron War Wolf. This mount was given to the player if they managed to obtain the Ahead of the Curve Garrosh Hellscream achievement on 10 or 25 man mode, which required the player to defeat Garrosh Hellscream in the Siege of Orgrimmar on any difficulty other than LFR, something that would change to heroic or mythic only in the future expansions before the release of the next expansion's pre-patch. Similar to the Grove Warden mentioned earlier, with this being the first Ahead of the Curve achievement to be given a mount, being something they would do from then on with all the final raids of the expansions, the reason this mount was so rare was because of Mr. Pandaria's content drought during Siege of Orgrimmar, and players quitting the game. There seems to be a pattern with this, only to then come back to obtain this mount before removal and finding out that they didn't have the gear to do it or gold to buy a carry. This is one of the few wolf mounts that Alliance players were able to obtain too, and less than 1/5 of the player base managed to actually complete the achievement. And at number 6, we have the Brawler's Guild mounts. The Brawler Guild's mounts, Burly Mushan Beast and Burly Basilisk, were available to purchase with gold if you reached a special rank in the Brawler's Guild when it was active. In the Brawler's Guild, the player would go against stronger and stronger opponents with varying gimmicks and mechanics to defeat them, slowly climbing in ranks along the way for each one defeated, as each fight was akin to a solo raid boss fight. The first added was the Burly Mushan Beast in patch 5.3. If the player reached rank 10 in the Brawler's Guild before the guild closed down in Legion, they were able to buy this mount for 4,000 gold. This mount is very similar to the Son of Galleon mount, obtainable from either the world boss Galleon in the Valley of Four Winds in Mr. Pandaria, or very rarely on the Black Market Auction House, or the Ashhide Mushan, which is obtained by doing free-for-all world PvP in the Timeless Isle under the Censer of Eternal Agony, something that is now almost impossible to earn due to the lack of players there. However, the Mushan Beast's brother, Burly Basilisk, is notable due to it being the first ever Basilisk mount available to players, having been introduced in patch 7.1.5, and was available for purchase if they reached rank 8 of the Brawlers Guild in Season 3. Both of these mounts have less than 1/5 of the player base owning them, and the Mushan Beast being even lower in ownership, as the first iteration of the Brawlers Guild was probably the most difficult. And at the number 5 spot, we have the Spectral Griffin and Wind Rider mounts. Blizzard wanted players who've taken a break from the game to come back and start playing again, and added a feature to the game called the Scroll of Resurrection, where a player with an active account could send scrolls to their friends who had quit a long time ago. If the person who received a scroll resubscribed to the game, the player who sent the scroll would obtain the choice of either a Spectral Wind Griffin or a Spectral Griffin, and the player who came back would receive a list of rewards as well, like a leveling boost and faction/realm transfers, along with a bunch of other upgrades to their character. In patch 5.4.7, this system was removed and instead just replaced with the character boosting service in Warlords of Draenor. Only 15% of the player base owns the Spectral Griffin and 14% own the Wind Rider, making these both extremely rare mounts, as it was pretty difficult to obtain if you didn't actually have any friends. And at number 4, we have the Pandaria Challenge Mode mounts. During Mist of Pandaria, there were Challenge Mode dungeons, and these dungeons were timed with bronze, silver, and gold ratings based on how fast you completed them. However, to make them more difficult, it would scale your gear down, although this could be cheesed by stacking gear with tons of sockets, as the gems would not be scaled down. By completing these, you would get unique rewards, including these mounts, in addition to a unique transmog set based on your class, and teleports to the front of the dungeons. Upon attaining the achievement Challenge Conqueror Silver, which only made the player complete all the challenge mode dungeons with a silver rating or better, they obtained the Astral Phoenix Egg in their mailbox. It was then redeemed at Kai Featherfall in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms for the player to choose one single color and only usable on a single character. However, in patch 6.102, the egg was removed from the game, and instead, if the player completed that achievement, all 4 colors of the mount would be mailed to them instead, and the mounts were then made account-wide. Before this, there were actually people who would complete the Silver Mode achievement on 4 characters just to get all the color variations, just in case, since they knew it would be a limited time mount. All of these mounts only have a 12% of the player base obtaining them, and according to some World First Raiders who played at the time, the number 1 way boosters made gold in Mist of Pandaria was selling challenge mode runs because of how many people wanted the mounts in Transmog, as you need to do it 11 times in order to get all the time lock rewards, something they reduced to 1 time next expansion before right out removing challenge modes after that. And at the 3rd spot, we have the original epic mounts from vanilla World of Warcraft. If you played during World of Warcraft Classic and managed to obtain an epic mount, you might have noticed that the mounts are different from the ones you get on the live version of the game. You see, the original epic mounts were unarmored. The player was given a choice in patch 1.4 to trade their original epic mounts for a free, new version of the mount, which was armored. If the player declined this choice, they would keep their original epic mount at no cost. However, since this change was made pretty early in vanilla, not a lot of people were max level yet, and even fewer had the gold needed to buy an epic mount. Yet, pair that with the fact that the game was new, and so many people saw these new, much cooler versions of the mounts they had, and didn't think ahead of how unique these unarmored mounts would become. These mounts are some of the most rare mounts in the game, as less than 1% of the player base owns any one of them. And at number 2 on this list, we have the Reins of the Black Proto-Drake. This mount was awarded to players who completed the achievement Glory of the Raider 25 player, which required the player to complete achievements during fights, like killing a boss extremely quickly with a certain number of players, or making the fights more difficult, with the Plagued version of the Proto-Drake being the 10-man equivalent, which is available in the Black Market Auction House, while the black one is not. Both this and the fact that 10-man was far easier than 25-man made the black one far more rare. Blizzard was asked during a Q&A during patch 4.03 if they will ever bring this mount back, and Blizzard responded with an indirect way of basically saying they're open to the idea, but no, they don't plan on it. They wanted to keep these mounts extremely rare and not degrade the work of players who did manage to do it by simply adding it back in. Although with the addition of things being re-added so much, it is possible they might add this in the future, but highly unlikely. Also, before we move on, this was the first time they added meta achievements, as this was the first raid in the first expansion which introduced the achievement system. Because of this, they experimented with them being a limited time thing, However, the player base did not like that, so all future meta achievements kind of became timeless, making this mount the only meta achievement mount to no longer be obtainable in any way. And at the number 1 spot, we have the Tribute to Immortality mounts, better known as the Crusader mounts. What makes this mount one of the rarest mounts in the game was that it was only obtainable by completing an achievement entitled A Tribute to Immortality, which required a raid group of players to complete the Trial of the Grand Crusader, and without letting anyone die. This meant not only could you make sure you did not wipe at all during the entire raid, you also had to make sure not a single person died during the raid. Since the tribute chest could only be found in heroic difficulty of the raid, it added extra stress into the group to perform optimally at all times and not have anyone DC. Since you could not reset bosses, and if someone died, it voided the achievement for everyone in the raid group, meaning you had to wait an entire week before you could try again. The idea behind this achievement, according to Blizzard, was to have a badge of justice for the rest of the player's life by completing something that so few players did, as it's listed at being 0% due to the scarcity of this mount. And also because of the random nature of just people's internet connections, they don't really do stuff like this anymore. So, they're easily the most rare and unobtainable mounts in the game.